What if I told you the God of the Bible wasn't always alone? Before Yahweh became the supreme deity of Israel, there were other gods, once worshipped, later erased or hidden from the sacred texts. Ancient inscriptions, archaeological discoveries, and forgotten scriptures reveal a pantheon overshadowed by centuries of religious reform. Who were these divine figures? Why were they banished from the Bible? And what secrets have religions kept from the faithful for thousands of years? Get ready to uncover the gods before Yahweh and the shocking truth that reshapes the history of faith itself. The modern Bible depicts a single all-powerful God, Yahweh, ruling alone over heaven and earth. Yet buried beneath its pages and hidden in the sands of ancient archaeology lie echoes of a forgotten divine assembly. Before Yahweh rose to supreme prominence, the Israelites and their neighbors worshipped a complex pantheon of gods and goddesses whose stories were gradually erased or rewritten. This transformation wasn't merely spiritual. It reflected wars, politics, and cultural evolution. As the Israelites shifted from polytheism to exclusive worship of Yahweh, priests and scribes edited sacred texts to suppress older beliefs, erasing once revered deities from Israel's religious memory. Who were these gods? Why were they removed? And what traces of them remain in the Bible we read today? The ancient Near Eastern religious landscape. To understand the gods before Yahweh, we must first look at the broader religious world of the ancient Near East. Israel wasn't born in isolation. It emerged from the cultural and religious soil of Canaan, a land dotted with city-states like Ugarit, Sidon, and Tyre. The Canaanites worshipped a pantheon led by El, the father of gods and humanity. Beneath him were powerful deities such as Baal, Asherah, Anat, and others, each ruling over aspects of life, storms, fertility, the sea, war, and more. Early Israelite religion mirrored this polytheistic environment. Archaeology and textual evidence suggest the Israelites originally acknowledged a divine council where Yahweh was one among other gods. Over centuries, however, this council shrank until Yahweh stood alone. El, the supreme God before Yahweh. One of the most striking revelations is that El, the supreme God of the Canaanites, was likely the original high god worshipped in early Israelite religion. El's attributes. El's name means simply God. He was depicted as a kindly, wise, bearded patriarch, sitting enthroned among lesser gods. In Ugaritic texts, c. 14th century BCE, El was the father of humanity and of the gods. He was a creator deity, referred to as El Elyon, God Most High. This title appears in the Hebrew Bible, notably in Genesis 14 verses 18 to 22, where Melchizedek, king of Salem, is described as a priest of El Elyon. Abraham himself offers tithes to El Elyon, suggesting lingering reverence for the older deity. Merging El and Yahweh. At some point, Yahweh began to merge with El. Psalm 82 portrays God standing among the divine council, judging other gods. Early biblical language often calls Yahweh El Shaddai, God Almighty, or El Elyon, blending identities. Deuteronomy 32 verses 8 to 9, in the older Septuagint and Dead Sea Scrolls versions, states, "When the Most High Elyon gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided all mankind, he set up boundaries for the peoples, according to the number of the sons of God. For Yahweh's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted inheritance." This suggests that Elyon El assigned nations to various divine beings, giving Israel specifically to Yahweh, a clear trace of an earlier pantheon. Asherah, Yahweh's forgotten consort. Perhaps the most controversial deity erased from Israel's religion is Asherah, the mother goddess and possible consort of Yahweh. Who was Asherah? Asherah was a powerful Canaanite goddess linked to fertility, childbirth, and protection. She was called Lady of the Sea and Mother of the Gods. In Ugaritic texts, she is El's consort and mother to many deities. Archaeological evidence suggests Asherah was worshipped alongside Yahweh in Israel's early days. Inscriptions from Kuntalit Adrud, 8th century BCE, in the Sinai read, "Blessed be you by Yahweh of Samaria and his Asherah." Another inscription from Khirbet el-Kham invokes Yahweh and Asherah for protection. These inscriptions imply Asherah was viewed as Yahweh's divine partner. The Bible's suppression of Asherah. The biblical authors took great pains to eradicate Asherah's worship. The Deuteronomistic reformers condemned Asherah poles, wooden symbols erected beside altars. For example, Deuteronomy 16, verse 21 commands, "Do not set up any wooden Asherah pole beside the altar you build to the Lord your God." Yet her presence was persistent. Kings like Manasseh, 2 Kings 21 verse 7, even placed an Asherah image in the Jerusalem temple. By the post-exilic period, Asherah disappeared entirely from official religion, and her memory was recast as idolatry. Baal, the storm god turned rival. Few gods provoked biblical authors like Baal, the Canaanite storm deity. Baal's identity. Baal, lord or master, was a dynamic god of rain, fertility, and agriculture, vital for a region dependent on seasonal rains. Ugaritic texts depict Baal as a warrior who defeats Yam, the sea, and Mot, death, to secure life for the land. Baal versus Yahweh. As Israelite religion evolved, Baal became Yahweh's chief rival. The biblical narrative painted Baal as the epitome of pagan idolatry. Prophets like Elijah waged spiritual war against Baal worship, 1 Kings 18, dramatizing the conflict on Mount Carmel. Yet linguistic and cultural similarities suggest Yahweh absorbed many of Baal's traits. Both were storm gods riding on clouds, Psalm 68 verse 4. The title rider of the clouds originally belonged to Baal in Ugaritic texts, but became a poetic title for Yahweh. Thus, Baal was not entirely erased, but recast. His myths were either demonized or reattributed to Yahweh. Anat, Astarte, and other goddesses. The Israelite religious landscape also featured powerful goddesses, such as Anat and Astarte Ashtoreth. Anat was a fierce warrior goddess, sister to Baal. Her violent exploits in Ugaritic texts contrast sharply with the more maternal figures like Asherah. Astarte Ashtoreth was associated with sexuality, fertility, and war. Her worship, imported from Phoenicia and Syria, was widespread across the Levant. The Bible mentions Ashtoreth repeatedly, denouncing her cult as idolatrous. For example, Solomon's building of shrines to Ashtoreth angered the biblical authors, 1 Kings 11 verse 5. Over time, these goddesses vanished from Israel's religious life. Their roles either eliminated or folded into negative portrayals of paganism. The Divine Council. A crucial clue to these forgotten gods lies in the concept of the Divine Council, which survives in several biblical texts. Psalm 82 opens, "God has taken his place in the Divine Council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment." Such passages suggest Yahweh originally presided over other divine beings. Early Israelites didn't deny other gods existed. They simply declared Yahweh supreme among them. This older theology is echoed in the first commandment. "You shall have no other gods before me." Exodus 20 verse 3. This doesn't initially deny the existence of other gods. It forbids their worship by Israelites. The transition to monotheism. So how did Israel shift from acknowledging many gods to worshiping only Yahweh? Historical forces. Several key events pushed Israel toward monotheism. Assyrian domination 8th to 7th centuries BCE foreign domination led reformers like King Hezekiah and Josiah to purify Israelite worship, centralizing it around Yahweh alone. Babylonian exile, 6th century BC exile shattered the old temple-centered faith. Prophets like Deutero-Isaiah proclaimed Yahweh as the only true God of the entire cosmos. Persian period. After returning from exile, scribes redacted texts to reflect a stricter monotheism. Many older references to other gods were edited out or demonized. Editing the texts. The Hebrew Bible underwent centuries of editing. Older texts acknowledging multiple gods were revised to fit monotheistic theology. For example, Deuteronomy 32 verses 8 to 9, as noted earlier, once read sons of God, angels, or lesser deities, but was later altered in the Masoretic text to say sons of Israel, obscuring the earlier divine council motif. References to Asherah were deleted, or Asherah poles were condemned as abominations. Baal became a symbol of apostasy rather than a legitimate deity. Despite these efforts, faint echoes remain, clues to the gods who preceded Yahweh. Why remove these gods? Understanding the erasure of ancient deities before Yahweh. If we were to step into the temples, shrines, and sacred groves of ancient Canaan 3,000 years ago, we'd find a thriving religious world pulsing with gods and goddesses. Names like El, Asherah, Baal, Astarte, Anat, Mot, and Yam filled hymns and prayers, watched over cities, and received offerings from priests and kings. Yet by the time the Hebrew Bible reached its final form, these gods had vanished, reduced to villains, idols, or utterly forgotten. How did this dramatic religious revolution unfold? And why did Israel's religious leaders work so hard to erase these deities? The story of why the gods before Yahweh were removed from the Bible is as complex as the story of the Bible itself. It's a narrative that blends political survival, cultural identity, theological evolution, and human psychology. Understanding this erasure helps us not only grasp the Bible's hidden layers, but also see how societies everywhere reshape memory and myth to serve changing needs. The world before monotheism. Before exploring why these gods were removed, we need to understand how normal polytheism once was. A polytheistic norm. In the ancient Near East, polytheism wasn't considered chaotic or backward. Rather, it was the natural order. Gods were believed to rule over storms and rain, Baal, sea and chaos, Yam, death and the underworld, Mot, fertility and birth, Asherah, Astarte, wisdom and kingship, El. Each city often had a patron deity. People honored the entire pantheon, but gave special devotion to local gods. Religion was not only spiritual, but woven into economics, politics, and daily life. Even early Israel shared this worldview. Inscriptions, place names, and scattered biblical verses reveal that Yahweh was initially one God among many. Reasons for erasing other gods. Over time, Israelite religion transformed into strict monotheism. Here's why other gods were removed or demonized. 1. Political centralization and control. Religion and politics were inseparable in the ancient world. Kings ruled by divine authority. Temples were not just houses of worship, they were banks, storehouses, law courts, and power centers. The role of kings. Solomon's kingdom, 10th century BCE, Solomon married foreign wives and allowed their gods in Jerusalem. This diluted religious unity. Divided monarchy. After Solomon, Israel, north, and Judah, south, split. Different religious centers competed for power. Bethel, Dan, Jerusalem. Kings like Hezekiah and Josiah in Judah recognized that religious unity meant political stability. Worshipping only Yahweh in a single temple, Jerusalem, helped cement their authority. Josiah's reforms, c. 622 BCE, centralized worship in Jerusalem, destroyed shrines dedicated to other gods, purged Asherah symbols from the temple. By eliminating rival deities, rulers ensured loyalty flowed upward to king and priesthood. 2. Crisis and trauma. Exile as catalyst. A colossal turning point came with the Babylonian exile, 6th century BCE. Babylonian conquest. In 586 BCE, Babylon destroyed Jerusalem and the temple. Elites were exiled to Babylon. Israelites faced a theological crisis. How could Yahweh allow this disaster? Polytheism offered a tempting answer. Perhaps other gods were stronger. The prophets, however, insisted Yahweh alone was sovereign, even over Babylon's gods. Monotheism as a response. To maintain faith and identity, exiled priests and scribes tightened theological boundaries. Yahweh wasn't defeated. He allowed the exile as punishment. Other gods were false and powerless. Yahweh was not merely Israel's God, but the only God. Thus, monotheism was forged in the crucible of exile, a response to suffering and the threat of assimilation. 3. Cultural identity and survival. Israel was a small nation surrounded by powerful empires: Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia. Cultural survival demanded distinction. Defining Israeliteness. Canaanites worshiped Baal and Asherah. Phoenicians honored Astarte. Egyptians revered Isis and Osiris. By condemning these gods as foreign, Israelite leaders created boundaries. You shall have no other gods before me. Exodus 20 verse 3. This wasn't initially a claim that other gods didn't exist. It was a demand for loyalty. Over time, the logic shifted. If Yahweh is the only God, others are not just foreign. They're illusions. Monotheism became Israel's badge of identity. It kept the community united through invasions, exiles, and diaspora. 4. Religious purity and moral reform. The biblical writers viewed worship of other gods as morally corrupt. Abominations of the nations. Fertility rituals involving sexual acts. Temple prostitution linked to goddesses like Astarte. Child sacrifice associated with Molech. Prophets like Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Hosea railed against these practices. They built the high places of Baal to cause their sons and daughters to pass through the fire to Molech. Jeremiah 32 verse 35. Whether these practices were widespread or exaggerated, the religious reformers used them as proof that polytheism led to moral decay. Removing other gods wasn't just theological. It was framed as saving Israel's soul. 5. Theological evolution. From henotheism to monotheism. Scholars agree that Israel's religion evolved gradually. Polytheism. Many gods exist and are worshipped. Henotheism. Many gods exist, but one God, Yahweh, is supreme for Israel. Monotheism. Only one true God exists. Others are unreal. Traces in Scripture. Early texts show hints of henotheism. Who is like you, O Yahweh, among the gods? Exodus 15 verse 11. Or, for Yahweh is a great God, and a great King above all gods. Psalm 95 verse 3. Over time, the rhetoric changes. I am a Lord, and there is no other. Besides me, there is no God. Isaiah 45 verse 5. The shift wasn't overnight. Some biblical books preserve older theology, while later ones reflect strict monotheism. 6. Priestly power and textual editing. Priests and scribes were guardians of sacred texts. As monotheism took hold, they systematically edited older scriptures. Editing evidence. Older references to gods were rewritten as angels, heavenly hosts, or sons of God. Asherah was recast as a forbidden idol rather than Yahweh's consort. Baal went from Lord to demonic enemy. For example, Deuteronomy 32 verses 8 to 9, Dead Sea Scrolls version. When the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, He set boundaries according to the number of the sons of God. But the Masoretic text changes it to, according to the number of the sons of Israel. This hides the earlier belief in divine beings governing nations. 7. Fear of syncretism. Syncretism means blending different religious traditions. For centuries, Israelites mixed Yahweh worship with Canaanite practices. Reformers saw this as dangerous, erecting Asherah poles beside Yahweh's altars, using Baal's titles for Yahweh, e.g., Rider of the Clouds. Suppressing other gods was a firewall against religious mixing. 8. Philosophical developments. By the Persian and Hellenistic periods, philosophical ideas about one supreme deity gained influence. Thinkers across cultures, Persian Zoroastrians, Greek philosophers, speculated about one creator behind all things, an abstract, universal deity. This intellectual climate encouraged monotheism. The biblical editors presented Yahweh as creator of heaven and earth, the only source of moral law, God not only of Israel, but of all humanity. Older polytheistic memories became awkward remnants. Psychological reasons for erasure. Beyond political and theological reasons, psychological forces drive societies to erase parts of their past. Cognitive dissonance. Imagine being a devout Yahwist in the post-exilic period. Your ancestors worshipped multiple gods, yet your scriptures now insist, besides me there is no God. The solution? Erase conflicting memories. Condemn the past as idolatry. Reinterpret older texts. This reduces cognitive dissonance and creates a clean, unified narrative. The consequences of erasure. Eliminating other gods wasn't merely an intellectual exercise. It reshaped Israel's history, literature, and spiritual identity. Lost stories. When deities like Asherah were removed, myths vanished. Female divine imagery diminished. Cultural memory was truncated. Modern scholars must reconstruct these lost traditions from archaeology and scattered textual fragments. Cultural amnesia. The erasure led to a kind of cultural amnesia. Many Jews and Christians today assume monotheism was Israel's starting point. In truth, it was the end point of a long journey. This forgetfulness shapes modern religious debates, as people assume divine revelation arrived fully formed rather than through centuries of struggle and change. Traces that remain. Despite all efforts, faint echoes of the old gods persist. Psalm 82's divine counsel. The plural word Elohim, gods, placed names like Bethel, House of El, archaeological inscriptions invoking Yahweh and his Asherah. These traces remind us the Bible wasn't written in a vacuum. It reflects generations wrestling with their past. So why remove these gods? The answer is woven from politics, trauma, identity, theology, morality, and psychology. The erasure of El, Asherah, Baal, and others wasn't merely a suppression of rival faiths. It was the creation of a new worldview. Monotheism gave Israel a unique identity. It provided moral coherence and theological resilience during crises. But it came at a cost. The silencing of diverse voices that once filled Israel's sacred landscape. Today, recovering the memory of these forgotten gods enriches our understanding of the Bible. It reveals that faith is not static, but evolves through human history. The story of Yahweh's rise reminds us that religious truth is never just spiritual. It's deeply human, shaped by fear, hope, and the unending quest for meaning. And in those ancient echoes of forgotten gods, we glimpse the complexity of a past far more colorful and alive than the neat lines drawn in later sacred texts. Thank you for joining me on this journey into a hidden chapter of religious history. The gods who existed before Yahweh challenge us to rethink the origins of monotheism and the evolution of sacred texts. If you found this eye-opening, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for more secrets uncovered from history, mythology, and religion. Share your thoughts below. Did any of these forgotten gods surprise you? Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, history is often stranger than we ever imagined.